The dim lights of Nexus 7's most popular bar, the Stellar Drift, cast long shadows across Commander Zortak's weathered face. His 4 eyes, once bright with youthful vigor, now held the dull glaze that only comes from seeing too much death. The scarred alien nursed his drink, a thick blue liquid that smelled of burnt minerals and offered blessed numbness after the 3rd glass. Around him, the bar hummed with the usual mix of species. Tall, willowy Floxians laughed too loudly at their own jokes. A pair of hulking Taurans argued over trading routes in the corner. At the far end, a human merchant haggled good-naturedly with the Ixian bartender. Zortak's upper eyes narrowed at the sight of the human. 20 Earth years since the war ended, and his heart still beat faster when he spotted one of them. Not from fear, not exactly, but from something harder to name. Respect, perhaps, or caution. The way prey animals regard apex predators even in times of peace. He hadn't noticed the young female coalition reporter until she slid into the seat across from him. Her skin was the same pale blue as his, though unmarked by battle scars. Her journalist credentials hovered in holographic display above her wrist. "Commander Zortak, I'm Vexna from Galactic Truth Network." Her voice held the crisp accent of the Coalition capital. "May I join you?" Zortak's lower left hand tightened around his glass. "I'm retired, and I don't do interviews." Vexna didn't leave. Instead, she ordered a drink of her own, something mild and fruity. "I understand your reluctance, but I'm working on a documentary about the Human Coalition War, a real one, not propaganda. The 20-year anniversary seems the right time for truth." "Truth?" Zortak snorted, a sound like rushing water through gravel. "There are 12 species in the Coalition. Each has their own truth about the war. That's why I need veterans like you. Soldiers who faced humans directly." Zortak had heard similar pitches before. Young journalists wanting war stories. They sought tales of coalition bravery, of noble stands against the human threat. Or worse, they wanted horror stories to paint humans as monsters, to justify old hatreds. He started to refuse, but something in her expression stopped him. Unlike the others, there was no hunger for sensation in her eyes, just curiosity, a desire to understand. "Why should I relive my nightmares for your audience?" he asked, softer now. "Because the next generation needs to understand what happened. Not just the battles we lost or won, but why the war changed us." She leaned forward. "The Coalition had never lost a war before we met humans. Now we're allies." "How does that happen?" Zortak stared into his drink. Images flashed in his mind. Human soldiers fighting with impossible determination. Human medics saving Coalition wounded. Human generals offering mercy when victory was theirs. "You want to know about humans in warfare?" he finally said. "I served in 3 campaigns against them. Lost 2 of my limb clusters. But what terrifies me most isn't what they did to my body. It's what they showed us about ourselves." Vexna activated her recording device, a small sphere that hovered between them. "Tell me." Zortak closed all 4 eyes briefly, then began. "The first time I faced humans was at Proxima Centauri. I commanded a Coalition scout ship, the Swiftclaw. We were part of the Vanguard, first to engage the human outpost there." The memories came rushing back like a tide. The cool blues of the command center, the confident voices of his crew, the absolute certainty of victory. We'd conquered 17 star systems before meeting humans. We were the dominant force in this arm of the galaxy. Our tactical simulations gave us a 98% chance of overwhelming Earth and its colonies within a standard year. He laughed, a harsh sound. The simulations didn't account for Sergeant Frank Russell. The bar seemed to fade around him as he spoke, replaced by the stark bridge of his warship. Alert signals flashed. Damage reports streamed in faster than his officers could process them. Russell commanded just 30 human Marines. We had over 200 elite Coalition troops. Our ship alone carried enough firepower to level their outpost 3 times over. Zortak's voice grew distant. We expected surrender when we broadcasted our arrival. Instead, Russell sent back a message I'll never forget. Come and get us. The battle that followed defied every military principle Zortak had learned. The humans divided into small squads, striking from multiple directions simultaneously. They used the outpost's minimal resources with devastating efficiency. When coalition forces adapted to one tactic, the humans immediately shifted to another. We captured one of them on the second day, Private Alan Miller. Barely grown by human standards, we expected him to give up their plans under questioning. Zortak's upper right hand moved unconsciously to a scar on his neck. He gave us nothing but his name, rank, and identification number, over and over, no matter what we did. By the 5th day, coalition casualties mounted. Zortak ordered a full tactical retreat to regroup. That's when Russell sprung his true trap. They had hidden mining explosives throughout the asteroid field we used for cover. We lost 40% of our remaining forces in the withdrawal, not in honorable combat, to primitive bombs triggered by simple proximity sensors. Vexna's expression showed the proper shock. That violates coalition warfare protocols. Humans never signed our protocols, Zortak replied. And that was our first lesson. We fought by rules. They fought to win. 3 more coalition ships arrived as reinforcements. The battle stretched into its 2nd week. Both sides suffered heavy losses. On the 12th day, something unexpected happened. Russell requested a direct communication channel with me. I expected a surrender. Instead, he proposed a temporary ceasefire, just 6 hours to collect the dead and wounded from both sides. Zortak remembered his confusion. The request made no tactical sense. The humans were outmanned and outgunned. Any delay should have favored coalition forces. I agreed, mostly out of curiosity. That's when I saw Russell in person for the first time. Zortak described the human sergeant, shorter than most coalition soldiers, with a weathered face and eyes that seemed to hold both deep weariness and unwavering resolve. He personally helped retrieve coalition casualties. I watched him carry one of my wounded officers with the same care he showed his own people. When I asked why, he said something I still don't fully understand. Because they fought well and that makes them worthy of dignity. When fighting resumed, it was somehow different. No less brutal, but changed in ways Zortak struggled to articulate. We finally took the outpost on the 18th day, at the cost of 3 ships and nearly 500 coalition lives. Zortak's voice dropped. To defeat 30 humans. Vexna's recording device pulsed softly, capturing every word. What happened to Sergeant Russell? He survived. Most of his squad didn't. The Coalition Military Council wanted him executed for his dishonorable tactics. But our field commanders, those of us who had faced him, argued against it. We recognized something in him that deserved respect. Zortak drained the last of his drink. That was just the beginning. My first lesson in human warfare. There would be many more. Vexna waited, sensing there was more to come. But that, Zortak said, signaling the bartender for another drink, is a story for another time. Vexna returned to the stellar drift the next evening. She found Zortak at the same table, as if he hadn't moved since their last conversation. This time he nodded slightly when she approached, a silent invitation to sit. His 4 eyes seemed clearer today, more focused. I wasn't sure you'd come back, she said, setting her recording device on the table. I wasn't sure I would allow it, Zortak replied. But I slept poorly, old memories stirred by our talk. He gestured to the hovering sphere. You may continue your recording. The device hummed to life, its soft blue glow reflecting off Zortak's scarred face. You promised to tell me about your second encounter with humans, Vexna prompted. Zortak's lower hands tightened into fists, then relaxed with visible effort. Yes. The asymmetrical nightmare, as we called it later. He took a deep breath. It happened on Daris 4, a mineral-rich moon orbiting a gas giant in what humans called the Epsilon Eridani system. As he spoke, his gaze drifted past Vexna, seeing not the crowded bar but the ghostly landscape of a battle fought 2 decades ago. Coalition High Command had learned from the Proxima Centauri defeat. No more underestimating human capabilities. This time, they sent a proper force. 400 elite troops, battle mechs, air support, and me, recently promoted to field commander for my valuable experience with human tactics. Zortak described the intelligence briefing. Coalition spies reported just a dozen human scientists operating a small research outpost on Daris 4, with minimal security. The mission seemed straightforward. Secure the outpost, capture the research, take prisoners for questioning. We deployed under cover of the gas giant's electromagnetic storms. Perfect stealth approach. Our scouts reported no unusual activity, no signs the humans knew we were coming. Zortak's voice grew softer. That should have been our first warning. The coalition force surrounded the outpost in a textbook encirclement formation. Zortak gave the humans 1 hour to surrender peacefully. When the deadline passed, we moved in. The outpost appeared abandoned. No resistance, no signs of life. We found their equipment still running, food half-eaten on tables, as if they had vanished minutes before we arrived. Zortak ordered a thorough search. The outpost's underground. Levels revealed nothing but empty labs and living quarters. He had just reported mission success to Coalition Command when the first explosion tore through their ranks. Not the outpost. Our own transport ships, all 6 of them, detonated simultaneously. 500 Coalition soldiers stranded on a hostile moon with no way home. What followed was unlike any battle in Coalition military history. Lieutenant Olivia Martinez. That was the name of the human commander we faced, though we didn't know it until day 7. Zortak's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile. She was no scientist. Neither were the 30-odd soldiers with her. The humans used the moon's extensive cave systems to stage hit-and-run attacks. They struck at night during storms, at mealtimes. They targeted the Coalition's command structure, communication systems, and supply stores with surgical precision. We had superior numbers, weapons, and training. But the humans had something we didn't understand then: adaptability. Zortak gestured for another drink. When we defended our perimeter with motion sensors, they used local wildlife to trigger false alarms until we disabled them. When we employed thermal imaging, they covered themselves in the moon's naturally cold mud. On the 3rd day, the Coalition forces detected human radio communications. Their communications officer, Private George Washington, was broadcasting what seemed to be reports to a human fleet. Zortak dispatched scouts to locate the transmitter. 3 scouts never returned. The 4th came back missing 2 limbs, crawling the last half-mile to our base. Zortak's voice hardened. He told us the humans had mined the approach to their position, not with advanced explosives, with repurposed parts from our own destroyed ships. Vexana leaned forward. How did they know your technology well enough to repurpose it? They didn't, Zortak replied. They learned as they went, captured a piece of equipment, took it apart, figured out how it worked, weaponized it, often within hours. By the 10th day, Coalition forces had suffered nearly 100 casualties without ever engaging the enemy directly. Morale plummeted. Soldiers jumped at shadows. Some refused to patrol at night. Then came the psychological warfare. Zortak's 4 eyes blinked in unison, a sign of deep distress in his species. The humans started using our communication channels to broadcast sounds of Coalition children, lullabies from our homeworlds, messages that sounded like they came from our families. Worse still, the humans began booby-trapping the bodies of fallen Coalition soldiers. Not all of them, just enough that recovery teams never knew which might be rigged with explosives. On day 14, I made a decision. We would assault their main cave system with all remaining forces, and this one way or another. Zortak stared into his drink. We had still never seen them face to face. They were like ghosts or demons from ancient myths. My soldiers needed to see their enemy was mortal. The assault began at dawn. Coalition forces moved in perfect formation toward the cave entrance where they believed the humans were hiding. They met no resistance initially. No traps, no ambushes. We reached the main chamber. Empty, except for a single communication device on the floor. As we surrounded it, Lieutenant Martinez's voice came through clear and calm. "Commander Zortak, I assume? I'd like to discuss terms." The humans had never been in the caves. They had circled behind the coalition forces and now occupied the very base Zortak's troops had just left. With all of its supplies, remaining vehicles, and communication equipment, she offered to let us live. All we had to do was surrender our weapons and wait for coalition rescue. Zortak's voice dropped to a whisper. 30 humans had outmaneuvered 400 of our best troops. But the story didn't end there. What happened next shocked Zortak more than the military defeat. I refused her terms, of course. Prepared my troops for a last stand. Zortak's upper right hand moved to touch a deep scar on his chest. But Martinez surprised me again. She offered a compromise, a temporary ceasefire to evacuate our wounded, just like Sergeant Russell had at Proxima Centauri. Even more surprisingly, the human lieutenant came in person to negotiate, accompanied by only 2 soldiers. She was shorter than Zortak had imagined, with dark hair pulled back tightly and alert eyes that seemed to notice everything. She looked at our wounded and immediately offered their medical supplies. When I asked why, she said, "Because this isn't about them. They've suffered enough." Zortak paused. In that moment, I understood something profound about humans. Their capacity for violence is matched only by their capacity for mercy. Both are terrifying in their intensity. The coalition rescue fleet arrived 3 days later. Both sides maintained the ceasefire until evacuation was complete. The last thing Martinez said to me was, "I hope we meet again in peacetime, Commander." At the time, I thought it was mockery. Zortak finished his drink. I didn't understand then that she meant it sincerely. Vexna's recording device pulsed softly in the dim light of the bar. "Did you ever see her again?" "Yes," Zortak said quietly, "but that's part of another story." The third night at the Stellar Drift brought a larger crowd. A Raxian music group performed in the corner, their harmonic tones drawing patrons from across the station. Despite the noise, Vexna found Zortak at his usual table, nursing a different. "Drink today, something clear with tiny bubbles rising to the surface." "Something lighter?" she asked as she sat down. "My doctor's recommendation," Zortak replied with what might have been a smile. "He says reliving war memories while drinking heavy spirits is unwise." Vexna activated her recording device. "You mentioned you would tell me about your third campaign against humans." Zortak shook his head slowly. "Not yet. The story has an order to it. First, I must tell you about New Denver, the human colony." Vexna's antennae twitched with interest. "The siege lasted nearly 6 months. I was there for all of it," Zortak said. "After Darius IV, Coalition High Command decided subtle approaches didn't work with humans. They authorized full military engagement, overwhelming force against key human colonies. New Denver was a mining colony on a planet humans called Kepler 62F. Rich in rare minerals essential for starship construction, it housed nearly 50,000 human colonists, including many civilians. Our fleet arrived with 2,000 ships, 20,000 ground troops. Zortak's eyes closed briefly at the memory. The Coalition Military Council assured us that humans would surrender when faced with such overwhelming odds. They didn't. Governor Peter Beck, the human leader of New Denver, evacuated as many civilians as possible before the Coalition blockade closed. Then he organized the remaining population, barely 10,000 people, into a defense force. The Coalition Military Council told us humans would sacrifice their wounded for tactical advantage, just as any logical species would, Zortak explained. They were wrong. The siege began with orbital bombardment. Human defenses fell quickly. Coalition ground forces landed expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they found a population that had turned their mining infrastructure into fortress walls, their excavation equipment into weapons. "I commanded the third wave of the ground assault," Zortak said. "We pushed into the main colony in what should have been a decisive victory. We outnumbered them, outgunned them. Their defeat was mathematically certain, yet the humans fought for every building, every street, every inch of their colony, not just soldiers, miners, teachers, doctors, all fighting with surprising effectiveness. On the 26th day, we captured a human field hospital. Zortak continued. That's where I met Sergeant Ellen Carter. Carter was a human medic in her 4th year of service. When coalition forces surrounded the hospital, she stayed behind with the wounded who couldn't be moved. Both human and, surprisingly, injured coalition soldiers captured in earlier fighting. I expected to find human doctors experimenting on our wounded, Zortak admitted. That's what our intelligence briefing suggested. Instead, I found Carter working alongside a captured coalition medical officer named Dr. Krill to save lives from both sides. Vexna's recording device pulsed as she leaned forward. The humans treated coalition wounded. Not just treated them, Zortak replied. Carter had established a neutral medical zone. She worked double shifts to ensure every patient received care regardless of species. When Zortak questioned her motives, Carter simply said, "We're all the same color when we bleed out." The coalition command was equally puzzled by this behavior. Their military doctrine classified it as a deception tactic. They ordered Zortak to continue the advance, including the hospital in the next bombing run. I couldn't understand it, Zortak said. While her comrades Chief Warrant Officer Scott Miller and Corporal Dwayne Jones fought us viciously on the front lines, she was saving our wounded behind them. For the first time in his military career, Zortak questioned his orders. After consulting with other field commanders who had witnessed similar human behaviors, he made an unprecedented decision. I refused the order to bomb the hospital. He said quietly. So did 6 other field commanders, the first mass insubordination in coalition military history. Coalition High Command was furious. They threatened court-martial, execution even. But Zortak and the others stood firm. They arranged for the hospital to be designated a neutral zone under the protection of both sides. Dr. Krill later told me that Carter had saved over 300 coalition lives, Zortak said. Soldiers who would have died without her care. Soldiers who returned home after the war. Who had families. Who lived today because of a human who had every reason to let them die. The siege continued for months. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. Food ran short for the humans. Ammunition. For the coalition. Neither side would yield. Then came the plague, Zortak said. A bacterial infection native to the planet. It affected both humans and coalition species, though humans seemed to have some resistance. The coalition medical corps was overwhelmed. Their treatments proved ineffective. Soldiers began dying faster from disease than from combat. And then, something remarkable happened, Zortak continued. Governor Beck contacted our command. He offered to share the human treatment protocols, said the plague didn't discriminate between our species, so our response shouldn't either. Coalition Command initially suspected a trap. They believed the humans might be offering fake cures or even biological weapons disguised as medicine. But, with casualties mounting, they had little choice. Carter came to our medical ships herself, Zortak said. Brought human doctors who worked side by side with our medical teams. Within weeks, the infection rates dropped. Lives were saved, on both sides. This cooperation created a strange situation. While fighting continued in the colony, medical teams from both species worked together aboard orbiting hospital ships. Soldiers who tried to kill each other one day might find themselves recovering in adjacent beds the next. The humans taught us something we had never considered. That compassion isn't weakness. It's a different kind of strength. Zortak's voice softened. It challenged everything we believed about warfare, about humans, about ourselves. The siege ended not with a decisive victory but with a negotiated ceasefire. Both sides claimed tactical success, but something fundamental had changed. After New Denver, more coalition officers began questioning our approach to the war, Zortak explained. Not openly, that would have been treason, but in private conversations, in mission, planning, in how we treated human prisoners. Word spread through the ranks about human medics who treated enemy wounded, about Governor Beck's willingness to share medical knowledge even while under attack. Slowly, the coalition's view of humans began to shift. Carter and I kept in touch. After the ceasefire, Zortak said, surprising Vexna. She helped establish the first joint medical research facility on Nexus 7. Her work there saved millions during the Crimson Fever outbreak 5 years ago. Vexna's eyes widened. Ellen Carter, the human who developed the Crimson Fever vaccine? Zortak nodded. The same. She never saw enemies, only patients, people who needed help. Vexana sat back, processing this information. So even during the war, connections were forming between our species. Yes, Zortak replied, though the worst was yet to come. The fourth evening, Vexana arrived early at the stellar drift. She found Zortak already waiting, his posture more rigid than previous nights. On the table before him sat not a drink, but a small metal object, a simple silver pin shaped like two hands clasped together. A human peace medal, he explained, noticing her curious gaze. Given to me at the signing of the armistice. I carry it to remind myself of both the darkness and the light I witnessed. Vexana set her recording device on the table. It hummed to life, its soft glow illuminating the pin. You said the worst was yet to come, she prompted gently. Zortak's 4 eyes seemed to dim as he nodded. The new Iowa incident. He picked up the peace medal, turning it slowly in his fingers. What I'm about to tell you, some of it remains classified, but after 20 years, the truth deserves to be known. New Iowa was a human agricultural colony, one of their oldest and most successful outside the Sol system. With nearly 200,000 inhabitants, it produced food for dozens of human worlds. By the third year of the war, both sides were exhausted, Zortak explained. Coalition casualties numbered in the millions. Human losses were proportionally higher. Neither side could claim a decisive advantage. Coalition leadership had grown desperate. Conventional military strategy had failed against the humans, who refused to surrender despite overwhelming odds. A new approach was deemed necessary. The Science Directorate developed what they called a targeted pathogen, a bioweapon designed to affect only humans. Zortak's voice dropped nearly to a whisper. It would not kill, they assured us, merely cause temporary illness to weaken human resistance. Vexana's antennae stiffened in shock. But biological warfare violates the Coalition's own founding principles. Yes, Zortak agreed. But principles become flexible when survival seems at stake. Many of us objected, but we were overruled. The deployment was classified as a military necessity. The bioweapon was released into New Iowa's atmosphere by stealth, drones. Coalition intelligence expected a quick surrender once the effects became apparent. The Science Directorate was wrong, Zortak said, his voice tight with old anger. The pathogen mutated upon exposure to New Iowa's ecosystem. What was designed to cause mild illness instead became lethal, particularly to children and the elderly. Within days, thousands of human colonists were dead. Tens of thousands more fell ill. The colony's medical facilities were overwhelmed. We didn't know the full extent of what happened until later, Zortak continued. But reports reached us of entire families found dead in their homes, of hospitals so crowded that patients lined hallways and streets, of mass graves dug by automated machinery because there weren't enough healthy people to bury the dead. Coalition High Command initially celebrated the outcome. Then came the human response. Their counterattack was led by Commander Susan Black, a woman whose entire family had died in the bioweapon strike, Zortak said. We expected vengeance, retaliatory strikes against Coalition civilian targets, perhaps even similar bioweapons, deployed against our worlds. Instead, Black assembled a team of scientists and engineers led by Dr. William Peterson. Together, they created something entirely unexpected. It wasn't a weapon. Not in the conventional sense. Zortak's hands trembled, slightly. It was a virus, but one that targeted machines, not living beings. Within weeks, it had infiltrated every Coalition communication system, every weapons platform, every navigation computer. The virus didn't destroy these systems. It did something far more devastating. For 3 months, every Coalition view screen, every communication device, every personal terminal showed the same images, Zortak said. The victims of New Iowa, men, women, children, dying from our bioweapon, their names, their stories, their final moments. Coalition soldiers saw the faces of those they had killed. Military leaders watched children gasping for breath. Scientists witnessed the suffering their creation had caused. No one could escape the images. They played on loop, day and night, across every connected device in Coalition space. They could have killed us all, Zortak said. Instead, they forced us to see our victims as people. The psychological impact was profound. Coalition morale collapsed. Protests erupted on homeworlds. Military personnel began deserting in unprecedented numbers. I was serving on the Coalition War Council by then, Zortak said. I saw hardened generals weep, watched politicians who had authorized the attack breakdown during meetings. One prominent science directorate leader took his own life after watching the footage. Vexna leaned forward. How did humans breach such high-level Coalition security? They had help, Zortak said simply. From within the Coalition, officers like me who had witnessed human compassion at New Denver, scientists who had worked alongside human doctors, even ordinary Coalition citizens who had begun to question the war. The Coalition sued for peace shortly afterward. They expected harsh terms, possibly even calls for those responsible to face war crimes tribunals. Instead, Commander Black presented surprisingly moderate conditions. When our negotiators asked why she didn't demand more severe penalties, "Do you know what?" she said. Zortak's eyes closed briefly. "Because vengeance is easy, peace is hard, and we choose the harder path." The final terms included reparations for New Iowa, but also established joint medical research initiatives, cultural exchange programs, and mutual defense pacts, the foundation for the current Human Coalition alliance. The most terrifying thing about humans, Zortak said, isn't their capacity for violence. Every species can kill. What makes humans unique is their ability to make profound moral choices even in their darkest moments. He placed the peace medal back on the table between them. Commander Black personally presented these medals to the Coalition delegation at the peace signing. They were made from metal recovered from New Iowa's destroyed infrastructure. A reminder that something new can be built from ruins. Vexna's recording device continued its silent vigil, capturing every word. "Did you ever meet Commander Black after the war?" she asked. Zortak nodded slowly. "Yes, she became Earth's first ambassador to the Coalition. I was assigned as her security detail, an irony not lost on either of us." "Was she vengeful? Bitter?" "That's what surprised me most," Zortak replied. "She was neither. She carried her grief, yes, but she didn't let it consume her. She worked tirelessly for reconciliation, even with those directly responsible for deploying the bioweapon." Zortak picked up the medal again, this time offering it to Vexna for closer inspection. "Look at the inscription on the back." Vexna turned the small disc over. Engraved in tiny letters were words in both human and Coalition languages. "From the ashes of war, the garden of peace." "This is why I agreed to speak with you," Zortak said. "Not to glorify war, but to ensure we remember both what we lost and what we gained. The price paid by both sides." He gazed around the busy bar where humans and Coalition species now mingled freely. 20 years ago, this would have been unimaginable. That's the final lesson humans taught us, that enemies can become allies, that hatred can transform into cooperation. But only if we choose to make it so. On the fifth evening, the stellar drift was quieter than usual. A gentle hum of conversation filled the background as Zortak and Vexna sat at their now familiar table. The young journalist's recording device waited between them, but she hadn't activated it yet. "This is our final session," she said. "Is there anything else you wish to share about the war?" Zortak looked around the bar. His gaze lingered on a group in the corner. 2 humans and 3 Coalition species engaged in what appeared to be a friendly card game. "The war shaped us all," he said finally. "But perhaps more important is what came after." Vexna activated her recording device. "Tell me about that." Zortak settled back in his chair. For the first time since they'd begun these conversations, he looked almost at peace. "After the armistice, I was assigned to the Joint Coalition Human Reconciliation Commission. A gesture of goodwill, they said. In reality, many in Coalition leadership still distrusted me for my excessive sympathy toward humans. The Commission's task was enormous, establishing protocols for cooperation between species that had spent years trying to destroy each other. Cultural misunderstandings were constant. Old hatreds flared regularly. Progress came slowly, painfully. Do you know what the humans call it? Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, Zortak explained. All soldiers carry scars, but humans are unique in how they acknowledge psychological wounds. They taught us that too. Coalition veterans had no framework for dealing with the mental aftermath of war. Their cultures emphasized stoicism, moving forward without dwelling on past suffering. The concept of treating invisible wounds was foreign to them. Frank Russell, the sergeant from Proxima Centauri, he became a veterans advocate after the war, Zortak said. He established the first cross-species support group for combat veterans, called it Shared Skies. Russell's initiative began small, just a handful of former enemies meeting in a converted storage room on Nexus 7. They shared stories, acknowledged their pain, and gradually began to heal together. I attended my first meeting 3 years after the war ended, Zortak admitted. I went planning to observe, to gather intelligence for coalition security. I ended up returning every week for 2 years. In those meetings, Zortak found something he hadn't realized he was missing: understanding. Other veterans, regardless of species, recognized the shadows in his eyes, the tension in his posture, the nightmares he never spoke about. Olivia Martinez was there too, he said, surprising Vexna. The lieutenant who outmaneuvered us on Daris 4. She had become a diplomatic liaison between human and coalition military forces. The two former enemies, Zortak and Martinez, developed an unlikely friendship. She helped him understand human perspectives. He helped her navigate coalition politics. Together with Russell, they expanded Shared Skies across dozens of worlds. The most terrifying thing about humans in warfare, Zortak continued, isn't their ability to fight. It's their ability to forgive afterward. That capacity for forgiveness manifested in unexpected ways. Human scientists shared medical advances with coalition worlds. Coalition engineers helped rebuild destroyed human colonies. Joint scientific missions explored new star systems together. 5 years after the armistice, I received a strange invitation, Zortak said. Governor Peter Beck, the leader of New Denver during the siege, was retiring. He invited me to his farewell ceremony. Zortak described his shock at receiving the invitation. His forces had bombed Beck's colony, killed his people, destroyed his home. Yet the human wanted him present for this personal milestone. I almost didn't go, Zortak admitted. What could I possibly say to him? How could I face the survivors of New Denver? But Martinez convinced him to attend. The ceremony was held in the rebuilt Central Plaza of New Denver Colony, now a thriving metropolis with both human and coalition inhabitants. When I arrived, I expected hostility, perhaps even violence, Zortak said. Instead, Beck greeted me, like an old friend, introduced me to his family, showed me the memorial to those lost in the siege, including the names of coalition soldiers who had died. During the official ceremony, Beck did something extraordinary. He called Zortak to the stage and presented him with a small tree sapling from Earth, an oak, a symbol of strength and endurance. He told the assembled crowd that true peace isn't just the absence of war. Zortak's voice softened at the memory. It's the presence of understanding. He said both humans and coalition had lost too much to remain trapped in hatred. The sapling now grows in the central garden of the coalition embassy on Earth. Over 15 feet tall, its branches spreading wide. Commander Susan Black was there too, Zortak added. She and Beck had become close allies in promoting reconciliation. When I asked how she could stand to be in the same room as those responsible for New Iowa, she said something I'll never forget. Black's answer was simple. Hatred is a prison we build for ourselves. I refuse to be imprisoned any longer. Vexna's recording device pulsed steadily as she absorbed these revelations. These connections between former enemies were they common after the war? More common than anyone expected, Zortak replied. Humans have a saying, no one understands a soldier like another soldier. It seems that truth transcends species. In the years that followed, Zortak continued his work with the Reconciliation Commission. He watched as trade agreements were signed, as cultural exchanges flourished, as joint military exercises replaced combat operations. I now work as a cultural liaison between humans and coalition species, he explained, helping both sides understand each other better, preventing misunderstandings before they can grow into conflicts. Zortak reached into his pocket and removed a small holographic projector. He activated it, displaying an image of himself standing between Russell and Martinez on what appeared to be Earth, the distinctive shape of mountains called the Rockies visible in the background. This was taken last year, he said. 20 years after we tried to kill each other, we now vacation together annually. Russell's grandchildren call me Uncle Zor. Martinez and I co-authored a book on cross-species diplomacy. He deactivated the projector and returned it to his pocket. When I was young, I believed the purpose of military service was to achieve victory at any cost, Zortak said. Now I understand its true purpose is to secure a peace worth living in. Vexna's recording device blinked as it saved the final conversation. Thank you for sharing your experiences, she said. I think your story will help many understand the war and the peace in a new light. Zortak nodded slowly. That is my hope. He gestured toward his communication device on the table. I received a message earlier today. The 20th anniversary of the armistice signing is next month. Earth is hosting a commemoration ceremony. I've been invited to speak. Will you go? Vexna asked. Zortak looked once more around the bar, at the mixed groups of humans and coalition, species sharing drinks, playing games, living the peace that had cost so much to achieve. Yes, he said, to honor those lost, to celebrate what we've built, and to remind everyone that our greatest strength isn't in our capacity for war, but in our choice to pursue peace instead.